The Young and the Restless spoilers full. The road to Las Vegas no longer feels like a detour in Matt Clark's story. It feels like a graveyard waiting to choose its next body. Everything about the way this drama has been building suggests that the danger is no longer emotional, legal, or even strategic in the ordinary soap opera sense. It is becoming physical, brutal, and potentially irreversible. The moment Matt steps fully back onto the canvas, the story stops being about whether he still has power and starts becoming about how far he is willing to go now that he has nothing left to lose. That is what makes his return so unsettling. A man like Matt is most dangerous when the systems that were supposed to stop him have already failed. He slipped past legal consequences, and that kind of escape does not humble a man built like him. It feeds him. It confirms his worst instincts. It tells him that he is still untouchable, still clever enough to turn fear into leverage and chaos into opportunity. Once a man like that believes he has survived the fire, he does not come back grateful. He comes back convinced he should have burned everything down in the first place. That is why Las Vegas feels like the perfect setting for this next stage. Vegas is not just a backdrop filled with neon lights, casino glamour, and the illusion of luck. In a story like this, Vegas becomes symbolic. It is a city built on risk, deception, appetite, and the dangerous belief that one more move can change everything. People go there to win big, to hide, to disappear, to reinvent themselves, and sometimes to destroy themselves before dawn. Matt stepping into that environment makes the whole storyline darker, because it mirrors the state of mind he seems to be carrying now. He is not returning as a man interested in closure. He is returning as someone who wants to settle emotional debts with blood-level intensity. The fact that his reappearance could trigger deadly consequences does not feel exaggerated. It feels like the natural endpoint of a revenge arc that has been allowed to ferment in secrecy and humiliation. From the moment Matt escaped, the legal consequences hanging over him, his direction became obvious. He was never going to walk away and rebuild a life in peace. Men driven by pride do not accept survival as enough when they believe they have been publicly diminished. They want restoration through punishment. They want the people who exposed them, cornered them, or humiliated them to feel even more fear than they did. Matt's revenge was probably never about one single person. It was always about taking a knife to the entire emotional architecture of the Newman family, cutting where the damage would spread the farthest. That is why his return matters so much. It is not the comeback of a defeated villain. It is the re-entry of a man who has spent time off-screen sharpening himself into something colder. He has already proven that he is resourceful, patient, and willing to play the long game. That alone is enough reason to fear him. But what makes the Vegas chapter feel potentially fatal is the possibility that he is done playing slowly. This may be the point where calculation gives way to eruption. Nick Newman's position in all of this is what turns the story from dangerous to explosive. Nick is not merely worried. He is not standing on the sidelines hoping the law handles Matt. Nick's emotions have crossed into something much harsher and much more volatile. He wants Matt gone for good. He wants the threat erased completely, not restrained, not delayed, not redirected. That desire says everything about how serious the situation has become. Nick is a man who has spent much of his life navigating the moral wreckage created by the Newman Empire, often trying to separate himself from Victor's most ruthless impulses. But when it comes to protecting his family, there are times when Nick's restraint begins to look dangerously thin. The more he believes Matt remains an active threat, the more likely he is to abandon the idea of justice and start focusing only on outcome. That is the psychological shift that makes this story so compelling. Nick may tell himself that he is acting out of protection, out of necessity, out of love for his family, but beneath that is a darker truth he may not want to name. A part of him may genuinely want Matt dead, not just because Matt is dangerous, but because hatred has finally become easier to carry than fear. Once that line is crossed internally, the entire Vegas storyline becomes a powder keg, because the most frightening possibility is not simply that Matt may die. It is that Matt may drag someone else down with him before the story is over. When revenge hardens on both sides, fatal outcomes become more likely, not because either man wakes up planning murder in clean, simple terms, but because rage changes the meaning of risk. Nick may go to Vegas believing he can finish this once and for all, believing he can outmaneuver Matt, corner him, maybe even scare him into disappearing permanently. But men driven by vengeance rarely control the final shape of the violence they unleash. One wrong move, one weapon pulled too quickly, one desperate struggle in a hotel suite, casino garage, or desert roadside, and suddenly the story shifts from revenge to irreversible tragedy. Matt is the obvious candidate for a deadly ending, but the darker possibility is that his death would not come alone. Someone trying to stop him, expose him, or protect Nick could easily be caught in the middle. Someone Matt targets to punish Nick could become collateral before Nick ever gets his hands on him. Or Nick himself, so determined to put an end to the threat, could walk into a trap designed to make sure he never gets home. That possibility gives the entire arc its fatal pulse, because if this were only about Matt dying, the story would be grim but straightforward. What makes it rich with dread is the suggestion that Matt may not be the only life hanging in the balance. That one detail changes everything. It means the climax may not be a simple showdown between hunter and hunted. It may become a chain reaction. If Matt has truly spent this time plotting revenge, then he knows Nick well enough to understand how to provoke him. He knows Nick's greatest vulnerability is not his pride, but his family. The surest way to drag Nick into dangerous territory would be to threaten someone Nick cannot afford to lose. That could mean luring him to Vegas under false pretenses. It could mean staging a confrontation that looks like one thing on the surface while a second, more devastating move unfolds elsewhere. It could mean making Nick choose between stopping Matt and saving someone he loves. In a city like Vegas, where every hallway looks temporary and every exit can become a trap, that kind of scheme feels chillingly plausible. There is also the shadow of Victor over all of this, whether he is physically present in the confrontation or not, because no Newman revenge story ever exists in isolation from Victor's worldview. Nick may despise becoming like his father, but in moments like this, the family legacy becomes harder to escape. Victor has always believed that threats must be neutralized completely. Not managed, not negotiated with, not trusted to fade away, destroyed. Nick wanting Matt dead suggests that under enough pressure, even the son who resists Victor's methods can start thinking in Victor's language. That is part of what makes the arc emotionally powerful. It is not only about external danger. It is about what this pursuit is doing to Nick internally. Every step he takes toward Matt may also be a step toward becoming the kind of man he has spent years trying not to be. If the Vegas plot ends in death, Nick may get the outcome he thinks he wants while losing a part of himself in the process. And in some ways that is even darker than physical injury. A man can survive a gunshot or a fight. It is much harder to survive the knowledge that in the end you were willing to become monstrous to protect what you loved. Matt, meanwhile, is exactly the kind of enemy who would understand that kind of psychological weakness and exploit it. He does not need to overpower Nick physically if he can contaminate Nick morally. Imagine the damage if Matt pushes Nick into a situation where Nick believes he caused a death even accidentally. Imagine if Matt engineers events so that Nick survives, but only after someone else pays the price. That would be a revenge far more devastating than simply taking a shot at him. It would leave Nick carrying guilt, suspicion, and the haunting possibility that Matt won even in defeat. That may be where the real danger lies. Not in whether Matt can beat Nick in a direct confrontation, but in whether he can poison the emotional aftermath so thoroughly that the Newman family emerges from Vegas more fractured than before. And if another life is lost, the ripple effect would be immense. The Newman family does not absorb trauma quietly. Death never lands as a single event in that world. It spreads through marriages, loyalties, rivalries, and old resentments that were only temporarily buried. If someone connected to Nick dies because of this vendetta, the consequences would not end at the crime scene. Sharon, Victor, Nikki, Adam, Victoria, and everyone circling the Newmans would feel the impact in different ways. Some would blame Matt, some would blame Nick for escalating the situation, some would blame Victor for teaching his family that survival always matters more than moral limits. And beneath all of that would be the cruelest question of all. Was this preventable, or was the moment Matt walked free always the moment a death sentence began ticking for someone? That question gives the storyline its tragic energy, because the audience can sense that the characters are no longer moving through ordinary conflict, they are moving toward reckoning. Matt has the kind of volatility that makes every scene with him feel one breath away from violence. Nick has the kind of protective fury that can turn reckless without much warning. Las Vegas amplifies both qualities. It strips away the domestic protections of Genoa City and places them in a setting where desperation, secrecy, and split-second decisions feel almost inevitable. A confrontation there should not feel civilized. It should feel feverish, unpredictable, and slightly unreal, the kind of night where one bad decision keeps multiplying until sunrise reveals the damage. So yes, this Vegas story absolutely looks like it could be heading toward death. Matt may very well lose his life before it is over, and the writing seems to be pointing toward that possibility with increasing force. He has become too unstable, too driven by revenge, and too dangerous to simply fade back into the shadows without some brutal final consequence. But the more haunting idea is that his death, if it comes, may not close the story cleanly. It may tear another life apart first. It may take someone unexpected. It may leave Nick stained by the very darkness he was trying to eliminate. It may prove that even when the villain falls, the damage he set in motion keeps moving long after his body does not. That is what makes this plot feel so dangerous now. It is no longer asking whether Matt will retaliate. It is asking who will still be standing when the retaliation is over. And in a revenge story built on rage, wounded pride, and a city designed to tempt fate, that answer may be far uglier than anyone is prepared for.